You walk into a crowded room filled with loud, superficial chatter, and suddenly you feel like a deep-sea diver trapped inside a shallow, noisy backyard swimming pool. This isn't some inflated ego trip. This is the quiet, suffocating reality of existing on a cognitive frequency that simply does not register on their everyday dials. If this quiet ache resonates with you, leave a mark in the comments below. Not for the algorithm, do it to remind yourself that you are not entirely alone in this room. Having a profoundly high IQ is rarely the superpower movies show. It feels more like a sensory processing disorder where you absorb all the hidden flaws in the system. Most gifted individuals spend decades performing a heavily redacted version of themselves, trimming off their sharpest edges just to make their presence palatable to others. The first behavioral distortion is chronic intellectual fasting. You are constantly surrounded by people, yet your mind is essentially starving for a real hearty meal. Jackson sits in his tech startup office. He can mentally restructure the entire database in minutes, but during the mandatory team building, he feels utterly invisible. He tried to explain a complex theoretical model once. Blank stares answered him. He quickly learned to shrink, to nod along with their small talk, and to vanish internally. This specific type of isolation comes from the visceral realization that your deepest thoughts will forever sound like foreign static to the people you see every single day. So you start rationing your insight. You use smaller words. You laugh at painfully dull jokes. You actively participate in your own erasure just to maintain social harmony. The therapeutic truth is harsh. Genuine connection demands shared emotional and cognitive ground. When your mental architecture is built differently, that ground is missing. You end up constructing a fragile bridge out of forced smiles and fake enthusiasm. Most choose to walk this bridge daily, silently resenting the toll it takes on their soul. Let's look at the second distortion, existential under-stimulation. This isn't normal boredom. It sits in your chest like a phantom limb, aching for meaningful resistance. Maya graduated with highest honors, landed a prestigious marketing role, and got the salary. Now she stares at color palettes, feeling her spirit quietly calcify into dust. Her brain is a supercomputer, yet society forces her to run basic spreadsheet software forever. This lack of friction isn't relaxing. It is a slow psychological starvation. A high-bandwidth mind requires immense complexity to stay healthy. Without an adequate challenge, your brain starts inventing anxieties just to have something to chew on. Drop a comment if you know this exact feeling, the agonizing certainty that you hold oceans of untapped potential, but the world only ever asks you for a single drop of water. The systemic tragedy is that our culture praises the average. It rewards blind compliance over brilliant disruption. Either you mold yourself into a quiet worker or you ache. The third distortion is the burden of clear sight. You do not just spot a minor mistake, you instantly perceive the cascade of predictable failures that will inevitably follow it. Connor watches his director present a deeply flawed quarterly plan. Connor has mentally simulated the outcome and knows it leads to total ruin. He raises his hand to speak. He offers a gentle correction. The director dismisses it with a patronizing smirk. The project collapses exactly as Connor predicted. Nobody acknowledges his prior warning. When you can vividly see the incoming storm and everyone around you insists the sky is perfectly clear, you start doubting your own sanity. It builds a quiet, heavy resentment. Highly intelligent people often seem cynical. It happens because they're forced to watch preventable disasters unfold in slow motion while their warnings are brushed aside. The psychological poison here is severe. Having profound insight without the authority to enact change turns you into a helpless spectator in a very poorly directed play. Fourth distortion, asynchronous emotional processing. Your reactions rarely match the room. When they panic, you analyze. When they celebrate, you see the temporary nature. Riley sits at a family dinner. Her relatives are passionately arguing over a sensationalized news headline. Riley feels a tight knot forming in her stomach, but she stays quiet. She isn't mad about their specific stance. She is exhausted by their absolute refusal to examine nuance. The lack of intellectual curiosity feels like sandpaper on her nerves. But if she speaks up, she's labeled the arrogant intellectual, the joy killer. So she swallows her observations, letting them ferment into a bitter, silent physical tension. You process a layer of grief over the world's willful ignorance that others simply cannot perceive. There is no socially acceptable outlet for this very specific type of sorrow. You learn to suppress it completely. You emotionally flatline yourself to fit in. Then, years later, someone calls you unfeeling, completely missing the sacrifice you made. Fifth distortion, the velocity imposter syndrome. Because your mind skips steps and arrives at conclusions instantly, you feel like a total fraud who is just guessing. Wyatt receives a massive grant for his architectural design. Holding the letter, his chest tightens. He thinks he just got lucky. He feels entirely unworthy of the recognition. You can't always explain your internal math. The processing happens in the dark, subconscious corners of your brain. Because it feels effortless, you assume it lacks real value. This traps you in a brutal loop. You over-prepare, over-analyze, and push yourself to the brink of total exhaustion just to prove to yourself that you belong in that room. Right below, if this strikes a nerve, the draining need to overcompensate because you are secretly terrified that your natural brilliance is actually just a cheap illusion. The irony is absolutely devastating. The most incompetent people operate with unwavering confidence, while you, holding the actual answers, remain paralyzed by self-doubt. Sixth distortion, social translation fatigue. You've studied human interaction like a complex foreign language, and you perform it well, but the translation takes endless energy. Brooke attends a networking event. She mirrors their posture, asks the expected questions, and smiles at the appropriate cues. Everyone loves her. She is fundamentally drained. She drives home in utter silence. Once inside, she sits in a dark room for 2 hours just to let her overloaded nervous system reset. This isn't introversion, it is sheer burnout. You become a master of social camouflage. You weave intricate masks to navigate their world smoothly. But living behind a heavy mask eventually makes you forget your real face.
The neurological toll is immense. Your brain constantly filters your vocabulary, suppresses your instincts, and calculates social risks in real time. It is incredibly heavy labor. Eventually, you start declining invitations. You isolate yourself, not because you dislike people, but because the energetic invoice for pretending to be normal is simply too high. Seventh distortion, the haunting of potential. Since childhood, you were labeled a prodigy. Now, that label wraps around your neck like a heavy, suffocating chain of expectations. Julian was a gifted child. He read college books in middle school. Now he's 34, working a mundane job, feeling like a massive disappointment to everyone who knew him. You carry the invisible weight of the life you were supposed to lead. You are tormented by the phantom image of the genius you feel you fundamentally failed to become. The unspoken truth is that a high IQ does not magically guarantee fulfillment. It doesn't bypass trauma. It is simply a processor, and a processor needs the right operating system. Society is very unforgiving to unrecognized brilliance. If you're incredibly smart but struggling to function, people assume you're intentionally wasting your precious gifts. You internalize their disappointment. You begin to view your intelligence as a broken promise. The shame settles deep into your bones, causing you to shrink even further away. Comment if you carry this exact ache, the crushing pressure of being labeled special early on, only to end up feeling like an absolute failure for simply being a normal human. Here's the therapeutic reality. Potential is not a financial debt you owe the universe. You're not obligated to produce a masterpiece just because you have the mental capacity. Eighth distortion: corrosive deconstruction. You see the hidden motives behind everything: advertising, corporate loyalty, social hierarchies. You instantly decode the manipulation. Savannah works in public relations. She crafts campaigns that manipulate public emotion flawlessly. She sees the absolute emptiness of the mechanism, and it makes her feel hollow. When you can easily dismantle every societal construct, meaning starts to evaporate. Nothing feels genuine. Everything looks like a cheap mechanical set piece designed to distract. This hyper-awareness leads straight to apathy. If every interaction is just a calculated exchange of resources, why participate? You become a ghost observing the world from afar. Apathy protects you from disappointment, but it locks you inside a sterile, emotionless vault. You avoid the messiness of life, but you also miss the genuine warmth of living.
This is where the necessary shift must happen. You have spent your entire life trying to squeeze a massive, complex consciousness into a tiny, standardized societal container. Stop blaming yourself for feeling uncomfortable in spaces that were literally designed to keep people asleep. You are awake in a room full of sleepwalkers. Stop apologizing for it. Your healing begins the exact moment you drop the heavy mask. Stop sanding down your intellect to make others comfortable. Their fragility is absolutely not your responsibility. You must actively hunt for your intellectual frequency. Find the rare few who do not require you to translate your soul. Let go of the overwhelming majority who drain your core. This requires radical boundary setting. If a conversation feels like chewing on dry cardboard, walk away. If an environment stifles your mind, begin planning your exit today. You need to transition from the people-pleasing genius to the fiercely protected architect of your own peace. Stop giving your premium energy to people who only want small talk. Build a psychological fortress. You keep your deep empathy, but you install heavy iron gates. You only open the doors for those who bring actual value to your mental space. Stop handing out brilliant solutions to people who only want to complain. Stop analyzing toxic dynamics hoping to fix them. Some systems are designed to fail. Let them collapse. As you reclaim your energy, the exhaustion begins to lift. The profound loneliness shifts into luxurious solitude. You stop feeling abandoned and start feeling highly selective. Your high IQ is no longer a heavy backpack full of rocks. It transforms into an internal compass, guiding you precisely away from the noise and toward genuine, quiet authenticity. You recognize that your mind is your sanctuary, not a public utility meant to serve everyone else. You finally give yourself permission to exist without constantly producing. If these words have reached the isolated part of your mind today, drop one single word in the comments that describes your current state. Validate your own reality right now. Society will relentlessly demand that you play a simpler role. They will ask you to turn down your volume. You will look them in the eye and refuse to comply any longer. Your intellect is a profound diagnostic tool. Use it to curate a life that actually fits you, rather than twisting your spine to fit into the painfully small boxes they handed you. Hold on to this thought as you go about your day. You are not fundamentally broken for feeling out of place. You are simply a vast ocean trying to survive inside a tiny glass jar.